So the horror in Gaza goes on as Israel continues its bombardment of the Strip in its aim to destroy Hamas and return the remaining hostages. It says it's doing what it can to avoid civilian casualties. But as the death toll rises, Israel is facing growing international pressure to show more restraint. Hamas officials say at least 150 Palestinians have been killed in one day in Israeli attacks across the territory, and 2 Palestinian Christian women sheltering inside the Holy Family Catholic Church were shot dead at the weekend, an attack the Pope called an act of pure terrorism, with hundreds of civilians still trapped in the church. Meanwhile, 124 Israeli hostages are still held in Gaza, and their families say the Israeli government is not showing any plans with the specific goal of getting them out. And at the UN Security Council, a fresh draft resolution for a cessation of hostilities and for safe and unhindered access for aid into Gaza is being tabled amid mounting international concern. But what difference will all this make?
And I'm not here to dictate timelines or terms. Our support to Israel's right to defend itself is ironclad, as you've heard me say a number of times, and
it's the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who is in Israel. Well, for his assessment of the latest developments in the war in Gaza, I'm joined now in the studio by the former Nigerian diplomat who served in many countries in Africa, Europe, and the Americas, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Great to see you, Mr. Keshi.
Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. France is now joining the likes of Germany and Britain in calling for a sustained ceasefire. What do you think are the chances of that happening at this point? We understand Hamas is starting to talk again with the Israelis.
Well, look, if there is a new development in terms of dialogue between the two parties, it's a welcome development, and it should be pushed, forward. But for the West, coming at this point in time to recognize that they need to call for sustained ceasefire, I just think that it's coming too late, too little. So many lives have been lost, particularly at the Gaza end. These are not Hamas operatives. These are women and children in particular. And by the way, the Israelis too, the soldiers, about 177 a few days ago, have been lost in this operation in Gaza. So the question is, must so many people die before these leaders come to their senses that, look, they need to find a lasting solution to the problem of this area.
And to buttress the point you're making, which is a very important one, a French MP suggested that in the beginning of this war, Israel was killing 5 innocent civilians to catch one Hamas combatant. But, I mean, that is obviously unacceptable. But now it's got much worse, going up to 100 to 1. Surely there must be other ways, including intelligence gathering, to target Hamas operatives.
Part of the reason for this Israeli disproportionate response to what Hamas did on October 7 is self-preservation. Prime Minister Netanyahu is trying to preserve his own political future. The military chiefs are also trying to, change the narratives of the fact that they took their eyes off the ball and we are caught sleeping. Everybody is in a game of self-preservation. And at the end of it all, more and more people are dying. But look, at the end of the day, I think it was an Israeli parliamentarian or British who says, Israel will eventually lose this war. Not necessarily in terms of military strength. And by the way, the myth about Israel having the best fighting force in the world has been destroyed by this war.
And that's one of the reasons why they're acting the way they are. They're trying to claw back some of that image. They have shown
that it was all hype because of what they did in the past. But over the years, apparently, they've become very complacent, and the result of it is that today, I think it's right for us to say Israel doesn't even know how to fight. The old Israel would have gone in without all this destruction to look for the
people who actually planned the attack.
Who planned it, and the and the
people who carried that.
hostages.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing I said in one of our interviews, that look, Israel has the capacity. But I do realize now that Israel actually do not have the capacity.
Well, but
you can also see the failure of intelligence.
But do you think Israel is acting out of a sense of anger and revenge rather than a sense of justice? Because what happens when you act out of a sense of anger is that you become blinded.
Look, you have just described the situation, but even worse than that, I personally think that for the Jewish nation and for the Jewish people, they've gone through a lot in this, in their time. They've suffered a lot, and they should understand what suffering means.
Absolutely.
Than to impose suffering on people.
Absolutely. That's a very
the way that they are making the people of Gaza suffer.
A very important argument.
When you listen to news report about the situation, you begin to wonder, as I said earlier, do these guys have conscience? Do they sleep? How do they sleep at night? You wake up in the morning, you are the prime minister, you read the citrus that you've lost 10, 15 soldiers. They have family members. They tell you, you make press releases every now and then, and you say you've killed 120-something Hamas people. How many of the people there killed are Hamas? Are children Hamas? Are women Hamas? And by the way, before this war, Hamas was very unpopular in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah. Now their popularity is...
Now they are popular.
In fact, not only are they now more popular in Gaza, in the West Bank, which is a separate territory.
Precisely.
Their popularity used to hover around 50%. Now it is over 96%. As a result of this war.
The stubbornness of the Israeli leadership, but especially the right-wing leaders, has brought Israel to its need. And Obama did say something to Netanyahu and co years ago. He warned them that's to say, look, you cannot describe Israel as a Jewish state with so much, Arab population at the West Bank. That you need to allow these people to have a state of their own. You can have a pure Jewish state, but as long as you have this growing population of Arabs in Israel, it cannot be a Jewish state. And when he got tired of saying, he just left them alone.
But you mentioned Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. Is it going to be hard, if not impossible, to make real change in this war unless Netanyahu goes?
Look, I've always said it. This problem should be put squarely on the doorsteps of Netanyahu. This is a guy who, if you allow him, he will be behaving like Charles, not your own Charles.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
He will be behaving like, what's his name? Is it Charles or... Yeah, Charles. No, not Charles. The king who used to say, I am France and France is me.
Okay. You're not talking about...
Louis XIV, sorry.
Yeah, Louis the 14th.
Yes, Louis XIV.
Louis the 14th.
Who gets up in the morning and says, that is exactly the mindset of Netanyahu. He thinks he owns Israel. He thinks that he's the best prime minister ever in the land of Israel.
Clearly
and today he's preparing again to find a way to twist the narrative to his advantage, to say that he saved Israel.
It looks like as if it's not going to work this time, but we'll have to wait and see. But there is a bigger picture, though, isn't there? Because the Americans are increasingly signaling that they are unhappy with the current Israeli approach of not properly targeting Hamas. And the implication is that it's not sufficiently precise at the moment. So what can change under that heading? Because many people believe that if the Americans were putting that point sufficiently strongly, the Israelis would have to listen and change.
No, they won't. Not with Netanyahu. He's going to find a way to resist American pressure. He's done it before and he's going to do it again. And then twist the narrative to his own advantage, at home. But here's my take. The Americans should have done this from day one. As of today, the Americans and the Western leadership have in the way they have gone ahead to give, to offer support, and to keep saying that, yes, Israel has the right to defend itself, but they should have cautioned Israel from day one on how to defend itself. But as it is today, they've enabled Israel to go too far.
And that's a very important point, because the cries that we're hearing that are out against what is perceived to be American hypocrisy when it comes to many issues around the world. Obviously, those are not new, but we're told by the UN and various think tanks that those cries are profound at the moment, and you can feel it at almost every panel at the UN, and places like the Doha Forum, think tanks, etc. And that is the overwhelming view, that America has a discriminate sense of when civilians matter, when it comes to Europeans and Israelis and Ukrainians, for instance, but they don't matter when they're Palestinians.
No, they don't even matter when it's a race. Look, are they just realizing that, look, Charles, if this was happening in a place like Africa, you'll be hearing such words like barbaric, genocide, and so on. But when it now comes to, a place like Israel and the Gaza, you hardly don't see. Only a few newspapers abroad, they use that particular. No Jewish newspaper or managed by Jewish fellows in the United States will use such language. But if it was happening here in the continent, you'll be hearing such words, oh, these guys are barbaric. These guys are committing genocide.
But in your diplomatic...
Here we are. The worst genocide in the last couple of years is being committed today in Gaza.
But in your diplomatic experience, clearly the optics seem to be, even if it's very gradual, it seems to be getting bad for Israel. What I'm noticing, though, and that's where we'd like to tap into your knowledge, is the fact that as different from the Americans as possible is what we're seeing from Europe, because one by one, the European friends of Israel are calling off their unmitigated support and are now qualifying it by saying, we won't support you if you keep doing it this way, which is quite different from what we're hearing from the Americans.
Israel is losing support around the world. And the danger of what is happening today is that when you look, for example, at the United States, the younger generation of Americans are not in support of what's going on. By the way, the White House staff demonstrated against the president that he should not have taken the position he has taken. In the universities, I'm sure you are familiar with what's going on in the campuses all over the United States. There's no campus you find that it's in favor of this. Who just shows you a kind of break that the younger generation of Americans are not in tune with the older generation.
But are you surprised by that?
No, look,
from your diplomatic experience?
Look, the world changes every day. The younger ones certainly are not, you can't honestly say that they are students of history. They are not. It's a different environment and different generation. And so they are looking at it from a complete different perspective as their older parents are doing. And so Israel, for its own sake, for goodness sake, needs to begin to take all this into consideration. Look, many people have come over the years to admire Israel and things like that, but now they are gradually losing it. And it's a pity. And they really need to come to their senses and begin to question whether their disproportionate response has not gone too far. It's not just a question of ceasefire. When you listen to Netanyahu is actually trying to frustrate any talk about a two-state solution. But at the end of the day, that will probably be what will guarantee the security of Israel itself.
Yeah. On that note, I want to thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Joe Keshi. He is a former Nigerian diplomat. He served in many countries in Africa, Europe, and the Americas, and we are always the wiser from your diplomatic experience and analysis. Thank you very much indeed.